I was just trying to make my morning coffee when my phone buzzed. No name, no hello, just a single message and a video attachment from someone I hadn't thought about in years, Miss S. Callahan. Our old neighbor, the one who used to hand out homemade peppermint bark and had a weird obsession with flamingo lawn ornaments. Her message was chillingly simple. I'm so sorry, Quinn. I can't believe what I saw today. My stomach tightened. I tapped the video. It opened to the inside of a church. A familiar one, St. Jude's. My parents used to drag me there every Christmas Eve, like it was some sort of sacred tradition. Smelled like incense and mothballs and always made my eyes itch. The camera zoomed in slowly. Two figures at the podium. My parents. I stared at the screen like it had personally insulted me. My mom wore her favorite black lace dress, and pearl earrings, the ones she only brought out for occasions. She was dabbing tears with a tissue like she was auditioning for an award. My dad stood stiff beside her, gripping a piece of paper with trembling hands. Behind them was a closed casket, and next to it, a giant framed photo of me. I stopped breathing. My dad's voice came through the speaker. Calm, measured. She was always difficult. But we loved her. We tried. I felt like the floor dropped out beneath me. He was reading a eulogy. For me. Though she left us too soon, we hope her soul finds peace now. What in the actual hell? I was alive, standing in my tiny apartment, holding a half-empty mug of coffee and watching my parents mourn my death like I was a tragic headline. I scrubbed back through the timeline, watched it again. Same expressions. Same carefully curated grief. They didn't flinch, didn't stumble. This wasn't shock. This was scripted. I braced myself on the counter, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I hadn't spoken to my parents in over 3 years, not since they disowned me like I was a bad investment. But now this? A full-blown funeral? Fake tears? An obituary? I hit replay. My mom talked about my terrible accident. My dad mentioned how I'd spent my last years in isolation. Except, none of that was true. There was no accident. I hadn't gone missing. I wasn't in hiding. I was working a night shift at a coffee shop halfway across the world, living paycheck to paycheck, staying out of sight but still very much alive. So why the hell were they doing this? The video ended with a slow pan of the church. Familiar faces, extended relatives, old family friends. Even my childhood piano teacher, Miss S. Loring, who used to smell like lavender and frustration. They were all there, all dressed in black, all grieving like I'd been buried 6 feet under. But no one had ever called, texted, checked in. Not one. That's when it hit me. They didn't just erase me. They buried me. Alive. It hadn't always been this way. There was a time when I thought family meant something. Loyalty, safety, home. That illusion shattered on a cold Wednesday morning, 3 years ago. The day I got blamed for something I didn't do. The family business was bleeding money. My parents were panicking. And when the accountant flagged a massive withdrawal, nearly $80,000 gone, guess who got tossed under the bus? Not Rory. No, not my perfect golden, can do no wrong little sister. It was me. Rory, who wore designer heels and carried handbags that cost more than my rent. Rory, who had a taste for expensive wine and worse boyfriends. She took the money. I knew it. Hell, deep down, I think my parents did too. But they needed a scapegoat. And I was convenient. I still remember the look in my mother's eyes when she said it. Cold. Final. Better to have one ruined daughter than two. And my father? He couldn't even look at me when he whispered, "You've embarrassed us. You're not welcome here anymore." The next morning, I was gone. No money, no forwarding address, just silence. I called, blocked. I emailed, ignored. I even mailed a letter. Never got a reply. One by one, the doors I'd always believed would stay open slammed shut. Family friends disappeared. Cousins stopped returning texts. I became a ghost, and eventually, I started living like one. I moved abroad, picked a city where no one knew my name, changed my number, picked up a job at a cafe and started rebuilding myself from the ground up. Quiet, invisible, unremarkable. But I still held on to hope. Hope that anyone would reach out. That maybe, just maybe, one day my mom would pick up the phone. that my dad would send a card, that Rory would confess. Spoiler alert, that day never came. Instead, something worse did. About a year ago, I tried recovering my old email account. The system rejected me. Account deactivated due to confirmed report of user deceased. Deceased.legally die digitally die officially. I wasn't just disowned anymore. I'd been erased. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat there, watching that damn funeral video over and over like it held some secret I couldn't see. The fake sobs, the flowers, the lies. Something wasn't right. So I did what I do best. I started digging. First, I called my Aunt Gwen, my mom's older sister. We hadn't spoken in forever, but she used to slip me candy under the dinner table during Thanksgiving when my mom said dessert was earned. She picked up on the second ring. Hello? Aunt Gwen, it's Quinn. Click. She hung up. I called again, blocked. Next, I tried my cousins. One sent me a thumbs up emoji and then ghosted. Another asked if it was a prank. But then finally, someone responded. My youngest cousin, Lucas, the one who used to beg me to teach him guitar. His reply was cautious, Quinn. Are you actually alive? I sent a selfie. Very much alive. Tell me, what did they say happened to me? The typing dots blinked. Then came the answer that broke me. They said you died in a car crash overseas. That there wasn't a body. Closed casket. Cremated. Some international delay, I think. I dropped my phone. There had never been a car crash. I'd never even owned a car abroad. They hadn't just lied. They'd forged a whole death certificate. And that was just the beginning. After Lucas told me about the car crash lie, I didn't just feel angry, I felt hollow. A crash overseas, cremation, closed casket. The whole thing sounded like a bad script. And yet, people believed it. They believed I died alone in some foreign hospital, my body too broken to bring home. No one questioned the lack of details. No one wondered why I never said goodbye. Because it was easier, wasn't it, to believe the lie than face the truth. That's when I knew this wasn't grief. It was a cover-up. So I got to work. First, I pulled out every document I'd kept tucked away in a busted shoebox under my bed. Passport stamps, rental contracts, tax filings, copies of my visa renewals, even receipts from the tiny grocery store that sold instant noodles and off-brand chocolate bars I practically lived on. Then I logged into the National Public Records database. It took 5 tries and a coffee I didn't remember making. There it was, my death certificate. Quinn Ellery Voss. Date of death, August 14th. Cause, vehicular trauma. Status, deceased. Stamped, filed. Accepted by the government. They killed me with a lie and sealed it with a signature. My breath got caught somewhere between a laugh and a scream. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me gone. Forgotten. Legally erased. Like I'd never existed at all. It made sense in a messed up, twisted kind of way. If I was officially dead, I couldn't fight back. Couldn't ask questions. Couldn't claim what was mine. So I looked deeper. And that's when I remembered something. My grandfather's trust. When I was 16, he'd told me over dinner grilled salmon and lemon potatoes. I remember it clearly that he'd set aside a fund for me. College, travel, whatever life brings, he'd said, handing me a wrinkled envelope. Inside was a letter with account numbers, the ink barely legible. I'd filed it away, thinking I'd use it someday. Well, someday had arrived. I searched the fund. 6 months after my death, everything was transferred. Not frozen, not questioned. Transferred to Rory. I stared at the transaction record, my knuckles whitening around the edge of my desk. It wasn't about grief. It was about greed. She got the money, the condo, the family business share, everything. My parents signed off on it, probably smiled while they did. The same people who told me I was a disappointment. The same ones who said I was unstable, who blamed me for every fracture in our family, handed my life over to the one who actually shattered it. And Rory? She didn't mourn me. She cashed me in like a scratch-off ticket. I needed more proof. I wasn't going to just scream into the void and hope someone listened. So I turned to the one thing Rory never could resist: attention. She'd gone private on social media for a while, probably to play the grieving sister. But recently she went public again. Engagement pics, champagne brunches, sunset boat parties. The whole influencer light package. And buried in the middle of all that sparkle and spray tan was a wedding album. White roses, candlelight, fairy lights strung between trees. It looked like a Pinterest fever dream, and in photo after photo, there they were, my parents, smiling like they hadn't faked a funeral 6 months earlier, laughing like they hadn't buried their eldest daughter, toasting the bride, Rory, dressed in white and dripping in gold. No mention of me, not even a nod, but in one picture, just one, I found it, a toast. The groom, arm around Rory, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. And beside him, my father, raising his glass, the caption underneath, to the one daughter who always made us proud. That was the moment something inside me cracked open. Not broken, not hurt, not sad, cold, dead cold. They hadn't just replaced me, they celebrated it. The next day, I walked into a law office with a folder thick enough to need staples on both ends. The attorney, a sharp-looking guy named Nash, barely blinked when I said the words, "I want to challenge my death." To his credit, he didn't laugh. He leaned forward, curious. "You're saying you're legally dead?" I slid the fake certificate across the desk. "Not just legally. Paperwork, digital records, financial institutions, all of it." He read it. "Then the rest." His eyes widened slightly. This is fraud. This is a federal offense." "I know." My voice didn't waver, and I want to reverse it. Every bit. He looked at me like I was a miracle. Or a time bomb. "All right, first we file to revoke the declaration of death. That's the keystone. Once that's done, we go after the estate fraud, the trust misappropriation, and any other assets transferred under false pretenses." "Good," I said, "because they're throwing me a memorial this Sunday." His head shot up. "What?" I nodded. Apparently, fake funerals weren't enough. They needed a final performance. St. Jude's, 3 p.m. Nash blinked. "Are you going?" I met his gaze. "I'm going to give them something to remember." That night, I stood by the window of my apartment. The city lights flickered below like static. The folder with my documents sat on the coffee table, glowing under the lamplight. They wanted me erased, forgotten, dead. But I was still here, and now I had everything I needed. Let them gather in their black clothes, clutching tissues and murmuring prayers. Let them cry over the daughter they threw away. Because this time, the ghost was walking through the front door. Sunday came like a storm front. It had been raining all night, soft, misty sheets of water slicking the pavement, muffling the city. I woke up before sunrise, not because of nerves, but because my body didn't know how to rest anymore. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head for days, but nothing could prepare me for seeing them again. All of them. St. Jude's loomed in my memory like a bad dream. Stained glass windows, polished pews, that strange smell of candles and cold stone. I knew the place, knew the rhythm of its old wooden floorboards, the way the doors creaked when they opened too wide. At 2:45, I was already across the street. Black coat, sunglasses, hair pinned back. I looked like I belonged, like someone mourning a stranger. The church parking lot was overflowing. SUVs, sedans, luxury cars that screamed, "Look how well we're doing despite the tragedy." People poured in dressed in somber shades, hugging each other like grief was something fashionable. I recognized too many faces. Old neighbors, former coworkers of my father's, my second cousin who once braided my hair at a barbecue. They all walked into that church to say goodbye to someone they thought was dead. Not one of them knew the person they came to mourn was standing 50 feet away, alive and breathing. I waited until the last person slipped inside. Then I crossed the street. Inside, the air was thick with quiet sobs and whispers. An organ played something slow and sad. My face stared back at me from a framed photo next to the altar, the same one they used on the obituary. I was smiling in it, real, unguarded, a smile they didn't deserve to remember. My father stood at the front, voice solemn, hands folded over the pulpit like a pastor. "Quinn struggled in life," he said, "but she was loved, and we always hoped she'd come back to us." Lies wrapped in sympathy. My mother sat front row, lace handkerchief pressed to her lips like a dam holding back perfect tears. She looked like she'd stepped straight out of a gothic novel black dress. Red eyes, silver brooch in the shape of a dove, pure performance. Rory sat beside her, dressed like she hadn't stolen everything that once belonged to me, hands folded, eyes lowered. The picture of sisterly grief. I stepped inside just as the priest said, "Let us take a moment of silence to remember Quinn." Perfect timing. The doors groaned open, the sound echoing through the silence like a thunderclap. Heads turned. A few gasped. Someone dropped a hymnal. Then, for a few seconds, the world just stopped. I walked down the center aisle slowly, deliberately, every step echoing off the marble like a drumbeat. People leaned in, craning their necks to see. A woman near the back whispered, "Is that?" A child pointed. "Mom, that's her. That's the dead girl." I took off my sunglasses. My mother's face turned white, lips trembling. Her body jerked once before she collapsed in a dramatic faint. Someone caught her just before she hit the floor. Not a sound from Rory, just wide eyes and locked jaw. Her hand clutched the edge of the pew so tightly I thought the wood might crack. My father? He didn't even blink, just stared at me like I'd crawled out of the dirt. The priest stepped back, stuttering. What is this?" I didn't answer him. I walked to the front, took my place by the casket, and looked out at the sea of faces. Then I turned. "Nice of you all to come." You could hear a pin drop. I cleared my throat, pulled a folder from my coat, and laid it on the pulpit. "Some of you may be confused. After all, you came here to mourn me." Quinn Voss, the daughter. The sister. The troubled girl who apparently died overseas in a tragic car accident. I paused. "Let's clear that up. I'm not dead. Never was. And everything you've been told? A lie." Murmurs broke out like wildfire. A few people stood. Others looked at each other, unsure if this was some kind of twisted joke. I opened the folder, flipped through the documents like I was reading a grocery list. Passport stamps, visa renewals, work contracts, rental agreements, tax forms, flight records. I was alive the entire time, and they knew it. I pointed to my father. He signed off on the paperwork. All eyes turned to him. He didn't move, didn't speak, but the muscles in his jaw flexed. I turned to Rory. She didn't blink. She looked trapped, like a deer in headlights, and I was the damn semi-truck. She got the trust fund, the condo, everything meant for me. 6 months after my death, she filed the transfer, beneficiary of a conveniently timed tragedy. Gasps, actual gasps. Someone started filming. Good. Let the internet have it. Let them rewind and rewatch and dissect every second. My voice didn't rise. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. They didn't lose a daughter. They threw one away. And when that wasn't enough, they buried me alive. For money. For convenience. For their own goddamn peace of mind. I turned back to my photo. That smiling, younger version of me. Still hopeful. Still naive. You mourned a lie. But I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere. Then I did what no one expected. I closed the folder, picked it up, and walked out. No mic drop, no final monologue, just silence. Behind me, the church burst into chaos. Outside, the air was crisp and raw. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still lingered like they were waiting for the punchline. I took a deep breath. It tasted like freedom, but this wasn't the end. No. This was just the scene change, because the real reckoning, that hadn't even started. The next morning, the video hit social media. I hadn't posted it. Someone else had. Probably one of the dozens of people who thought they were attending a quiet memorial and ended up watching a resurrection. By noon, the clip had gone viral. The title? Dead Woman Walks into Her Own Funeral. Subtext, family pretends she's gone to steal her inheritance. She comes back with receipts, thousands of comments, tens of thousands of views. Most people thought it was fake. I don't blame them. If I hadn't lived it, I wouldn't believe it either. My phone didn't stop buzzing for hours. Messages from unknown numbers, people asking if I was okay. Others just sent fire emojis and clapping hands. A few called me Queen of Revenge, which made me laugh harder than I had in years. But tucked between all the chaos were the ones that mattered. "Lucas, you didn't just come back. You set the whole damn house on fire. And Nash, my attorney, we need to move quickly. The story's out, pressure helps, use it." So we did. He filed an emergency motion to revoke the declaration of death, attached everything my proof, the video, and the statement I'd written at 3 in the morning, fingers shaking but heart steady. It read like a manifesto or a confession, but it was just the truth. That's all it had ever been. Meanwhile, the fallout began. News crews circled my old neighborhood like buzzards. St. Jude's declined to comment. My mother reportedly refused to leave the house. My father gave a brief statement to a local paper, claiming it was all a misunderstanding born out of grief. Sure. Because filing fraudulent documents and cashing in on a trust fund is just how some people mourn. But Rory? She went silent, which told me everything. No denial, no fake tears, just silence. Nash and I filed 2 more motions, one for the wrongful transfer of assets, the other to open an investigation into estate fraud. We weren't just coming back from the dead. We were setting the record straight. And this time, it was legal. But there was still one thing I didn't understand. Why go that far? Why fake an entire death? Why risk everything? Sure, Rory wanted the money. And yeah, my parents wanted peace, maybe status, maybe to clean the stain of me off their perfect little lives. But something deeper had to be hiding underneath. People don't build a lie that big unless they're scared of the truth. So I kept digging. And that's when I found the property deed. An old lake house. Not on any of the usual family documents. Registered under a shell company created 6 months before my accident. The kicker? The trust fund didn't just go to Rory, it went through Rory, straight into a joint account with a man named Clayton Rhodes. I didn't recognize the name at first, but after a little digging, I did. Clayton was Rory's fiancé before the one she married. Older, wealthy, discreet, very married at the time. According to the internet, Clayton and his wife went through a bitter, expensive divorce right after Rory walked out of his life with a chunk of change. And the shell company? It was created by his firm. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about greed. It was about blackmail. Rory didn't just steal from me. She was involved in something bigger: money laundering, hush accounts, maybe worse. And faking my death? It was a clean way to scrub the trail. She needed access to funds without questions. I was the only thing in the way, so she erased me. Problem solved. But here's the thing about ghosts: we haunt. And now I had leverage. I called Nash and sent everything: account details, property files, timelines. He whistled low when he saw it. If this is accurate, we're not just talking fraud anymore. This crosses into criminal conspiracy, possibly even money laundering. Then let's push it, I said. Let's make them sweat, he agreed. We forwarded the documents to the investigator handling my case. We also submitted an anonymous tip to the Financial Crimes Division, with Clayton's name front and center. If Rory thought she was safe, she'd just stepped into her own trap. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I spent them holed up in my apartment, fielding interview requests I didn't take, scrolling through headlines I didn't ask for. Everyone had a theory. Some thought I was part of it. Others treated me like a folk hero. A few dug up old photos and started trying to analyze my trauma like I was a case study. But the truth was simpler than all of that. I had been thrown away, replaced, forgotten, and now I was writing my own story. Then, on Thursday afternoon, Nash called. They responded. My breath hitched. And through a lawyer. A very expensive one. They're claiming mental duress, grief, that the paperwork was an accident, that Rory misunderstood the legal process. I let out a short laugh. So now she's stupid, not evil? Basically, he said. But here's the thing: they offered a settlement. That made me pause. They want this to go away, desperately. They're offering full restitution of the trust, a public statement acknowledging the confusion, and they want you to sign an NDA. No. His voice was quiet. You sure? It's a lot of money, Quinn. I don't want hush money. I want the truth. He was silent for a beat. Then, good. That's the right call. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. That night, I went to the lake house. I needed to see it for myself. It was empty. Windows dark, gate locked, but I could feel it like the walls were still echoing with secrets. I stood at the edge of the driveway, wind cutting through my coat. staring up at the house that had been bought with my stolen life. I didn't feel angry. Not anymore. I felt ready. They thought I'd take the deal, that I'd sign their NDA, take the money, disappear quietly again. But I wasn't the same girl who walked away 3 years ago with a duffel bag and a bruised soul. No, that girl was gone. This version of me, she had evidence, purpose, fire, and I wasn't going anywhere. The morning after I rejected their offer, the media kicked it up a notch. A few smaller outlets ran with the story first phrases like fake funeral fraud, and daughter declared dead while alive abroad kept popping up. Then it hit a national morning show. They ran a split screen. On one side, the viral video of me walking into my own memorial, calm as a storm on the rise. On the other, my family's estate records, leaked documents, and blurry photos of Rory on a yacht she definitely couldn't afford with her marketing salary. The headline read, "The girl they buried, but she came back with receipts." Social media devoured it. And for the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. Nash called that afternoon. "Things are moving fast," he said. The fraud unit picked up the financial threads. "That shell company? They traced it back. Clayton's firm is under review. Rory's accounts are frozen pending investigation." I stared at my laptop, half shocked. "That's real?" "Oh, it's very real," he said. "And there's more. They're issuing subpoenas next week. You're on the list as a primary witness, but that's not the part that got my attention." I raised an eyebrow. "What is?" "They found a flagged wire transfer 25 grand, moved out of the trust fund 5 days before your accident." "Guess where it went?" "Don't say it," I whispered. "Clayton. And his name's also showing up in offshore accounts tied to property holdings across the state." I leaned back, the pieces clicking together so cleanly, it almost made me dizzy. This wasn't just betrayal. It was organized. And I had walked right into the middle of it. That night, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple, please. The message? Just one line. "Can we talk before this gets worse?" Rory, I stared at the screen for a long time. There was a time I would have dropped everything for that message. She used to be my best friend, not just my sister. We shared secrets, snuck candy into the movies, covered for each other when things went sideways. But that version of her, the girl I once trusted, died long before they buried me. Still, I didn't delete the message. Not yet. 3 days later, I stepped into the courtroom for the first hearing. It wasn't the trial yet, just the start of the process to undo the legal death and reinstate my identity. Nash walked beside me, calm and focused. I had my documents in hand, pressed into a neat folder like armor. Inside that courtroom, I wasn't just fighting to be seen. I was proving I had always been here. The judge was middle-aged, sharp-eyed, and clearly annoyed that her Friday morning was now headline news. But she listened. To Nash, to the timeline, to my statement. I stood up and told my story, the same one I'd lived in silence for 3 years. I watched her face shift, not shocked, not even angry, just sad. Like she knew how broken people could be when there was money on the line. Her ruling was clear. The declaration of death was revoked. My status? Officially alive. There was no applause, no drama, just the sound of a gavel echoing through the room, final and cold. And yet, it felt like a resurrection. Outside, cameras waited. I ignored them. But I didn't ignore the woman leaning against the pillar near the courthouse steps. Rory. She looked nothing like the sister I remembered. Tired, washed out, hair pulled back in a shaky bun, makeup barely holding, no designer coat, no pearls, just a thick coat and eyes that looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. She stepped toward me. "Quinn," she said softly, "please, just listen. I didn't move. Not toward her. Not away. I didn't mean for it to go that far," she said. "It was supposed to be temporary. Just until I figured things out." I blinked slowly. "You faked my death." She winced. I panicked. I needed the money. Clayton was threatening to ruin me if I didn't help him move it. He said if I gave him access to the trust through you, no one would question it if you were out of the picture. I stared at her, numb. "So you erased me." She shook her head too fast, like denial could rewrite history. "I didn't know they'd file the death certificate. I thought they'd just say you were missing." "Same difference?" I snapped. "You told the world I was gone. You told them I was dead. You looked people in the eyes and let them grieve me. Tears welled up in her eyes. But I didn't trust them anymore. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. I know it won't fix anything, she said. But it's everything. The account details, the paper trail, Clayton's backups. I copied them before he locked me out. I took the envelope hesitantly. This doesn't make us even, I said flatly. I know, she whispered. But it's the truth, and it's yours now. That night, I brought the files to Nash. He flipped through them like he'd struck gold. This changes things, he murmured. It ties everything together, your trust. The offshore transfers, Clayton's shell companies. It's enough for the state to build a criminal case. Will it protect her? I asked. He paused. She's cooperating now. That helps. But it doesn't erase what she did. Good. I wasn't asking for erasure. I was asking for consequences. As the legal machine started grinding into gear, I found myself breathing easier for the first time in years. Not because it was over, but because it wasn't just me anymore. The truth was no longer a whisper I held in the dark. It was roaring down corridors of power. And it was unstoppable. The courtroom was quiet, too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels calm, but the kind that's thick with weight. Like everyone's holding their breath, waiting for something to break. I stood just outside the chamber, folder in hand, pulse steady for the first time in weeks. This wasn't a hearing about whether I was alive. That part was already behind us. This was about what happened and who had to answer for it. Fraud, conspiracy, asset theft. My name was now tied to a case that had crossed into federal territory. And at the center? Rory, my parents, and Clayton Rhodes. The prosecution opened with a clear, brutal timeline. They showed the transfers, the shell companies, the forged documents, then came the funeral video. Even the bailiff shifted in his seat as it played. There I was, walking into a church full of people mourning me. My father's face as he gave a speech about my troubled soul. My mother's faint. The quiet gasp when I said, I'm not dead, but I am here to correct the story. The video ended. The silence after was louder than anything I could have said. They called me to the stand next. And I told it all. The exile. The silence. The night I learned I'd been declared legally dead by the people who were supposed to love me most. I watched the jury carefully how they listened, how they leaned forward when I spoke about waking up to find the world no longer believed I existed. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just told the truth. And sometimes that's louder than rage. My parents sat at the defense table, stiff and pale. My mother couldn't even look at me. My father tried once, but his eyes dropped before they reached mine. They had filed sworn statements claiming grief, confusion, clerical error, that they thought I was missing, that they only did what they thought was best at the time. But the evidence didn't lie. There were signatures, emails, legal filings. Their story fell apart under the light of facts. Rory took the stand last. Not as a defendant, she had struck a deal with prosecutors, trading testimony for reduced charges. She'd brought receipts. Records Clayton never thought anyone else had access to. She looked hollow, tired, but she didn't cry. Not this time. She told them how it started. How Clayton pressured her. How the trust fund was supposed to be a bridge out of a situation she couldn't escape. How erasing me became the cleanest solution to a very messy problem. I didn't just betray my sister, she said, voice cracking. I killed her on paper. For money. And just like that, the courtroom felt even smaller. The trial didn't drag on. Clayton was arrested during closing statements. Fraud. Money laundering. Racketeering. They caught him trying to move funds from another shell account the night before. Rookie mistake. My parents weren't criminally charged, but civil court was waiting, and the reputational damage was done. The estate was frozen, their names dragged through headlines and hashtags. They were living ghosts now. I knew how that felt. A month after the trial ended, I visited my old neighborhood. Not to confront anyone, not to relive anything, just to see. The Callahan's house still had flamingo ornaments. The same maple tree still leaned a little to the left near the corner. Nothing looked different. But I was different. I wasn't there to ask for anything. I didn't need an apology. I had closure. Back in the city, I met Nash for coffee. He looked relieved like a man who had just finished sprinting through fire and lived to tell the story. You know, he said, stirring sugar into his espresso. In all my years doing this, I've never seen a resurrection handled quite like yours. I laughed. Most people don't come back from the dead with a legal case in one hand and a mic in the other. He smiled. So what now? That question had followed me like a shadow for months. Now, I had options. I'd been offered book deals, podcast interviews, a streaming docuseries even, but none of that felt like the right ending. This story wasn't for profit. It was for peace. So I wrote something else instead. A letter. To myself. To the version of me who thought silence was safety. Who thought disappearing would protect her. Who let people decide her worth and walked away, believing they were right. I wrote, "You didn't disappear. You survived. And now, you're finally free." Freedom didn't look like revenge. It looked like waking up and not checking the headlines. Like walking down the street without fear of being invisible. Like planting new roots without looking back. I changed my name, not legally, just spiritually. Quinn Voss would always be part of my story. But I wasn't that ghost anymore. I was someone new. Alive. Whole. Unapologetically here. People say the dead can't speak. But I did. And when I did, the whole world listened. Story 2, we cast our votes. The gathering will not include you. My dad gave me a nasty smile. If so, don't count on my $7,000 to pay for your vacation to Italy the following month. As I blocked his card, I remarked, "Take a seat." With a smile on her face, my sister spoke. We must speak. I still hadn't removed my coat. There was a family gathering at 6, according to the family group chat. However, nobody explained why. I was still holding the gift basket as I stood in the center of my parents' living room. I brought like an idiot. From the recliner, my mother smiled tightly at me. Dad was on the couch drinking wine, with both legs crossed. Too cozy. My brother pretended not to be aware of it while he sat close to the window and scrolled through his phone. What is this? Slowly, sensing the change in the air, I inquired. Was there a fatality? No, my dad responded, setting down his drink with a bit too much fanfare. A vote was held about the reunion. Which vote? I inquired. He told me bluntly, "You're out. We've made the decision that you shouldn't accompany us to Tuscany next month." There was silence in the room. I blinked. Are you kidding me? No. She was virtually glowing, according to my sister. We just believe it improves the dynamics of the group. I exhaled sharply through my nose. Group dynamics. You're so tense all the time, she said. Last year, you caused tension. Do you recall the argument you had with the waiter over the gratuity? Because they increased the bill by €80, you embarrassed your mother? I lost my temper. The only one who saw it was myself. By the way, you are welcome. This year, we just want peace, Mom remarked quietly, avoiding eye contact. I gave them a look. The three of them. The ones for whom I made the travel arrangements. 2 weeks ago, they texted me to ask whether I would mind paying the villa deposit until your dad's bonus arrived. That amounted to $7,000. My card has been charged the same day. After that, they sent emoticons. Let me clarify. Slowly, I said. You're refusing to let me go on the trip I had planned? You offered the one I bought. My father shrugged. I made no promise to be left out. My sister crossed her legs like a judge in court and replied, Well, lately you've been rather stiff. Your small budgets and restrictions? You've evolved. I had a brief and terrible existence. Yes, I did begin to say no. She disregarded that. This is meant to be enjoyable. To be honest, you destroy the atmosphere. Destroy the atmosphere. I said it again. Do you mean that I prevent you from using my card to purchase 18 Eurospritzers throughout the day? You're going overboard, Mom. Cut in. Keep this from becoming nasty. Oh, I won't. I quietly opened the travel account associated with the trip after taking out my phone. On top of the coffee table, Dad's phone buzzed. What was that? He picked it up and murmured, I was the one who blocked the travel card, I said, the same one that I used to purchase your tickets. You simply had to have that Tuscan property with the pool and your hotels. You are aware that none of you reimbursed me. That is not possible. My sister got up and growled. I'm afraid I can't. And I did. What should we do at this point? At last, my brother said something. Why not? 3 weeks remain till the trip. Work things out, I said. Remember how relaxed you are? Bring the money to you. You are behaving like a kid. Mom lost her temper. I gave her a direct look. No, Mother. I no longer behave like a shill. Dad sprang to his feet, angry. You're being vindictive. No, I said, reaching for my keys. I'm being finished. And that's it. They were astonished in their expensive seats, wine glasses shaking, and fantasies of Tuscany abruptly dashed when I left. Because they did more than simply betray me. Together, they made the plan. I didn't get any sleep the night following the family vote. My apartment's ceiling phone was ringing on the nightstand as I lay awake. I received 3 laughing emoticons from my sister. I didn't answer. My mother texted me at around midnight. Keep things from getting ruined by this. You are still loved by us. The trip was made more difficult by you. Challenging. The trip was paid for by myself. I had everything planned. I reserved a 5-star property with a chef, a pool, and wine tours, since they pleaded with me to. And I was the issue now. But things really fell apart the next morning. Maya, my cousin, phoned. It has been a long time since we chatted, primarily because my sister detested her and always made fun of Maya for not fitting in. Hey, she said. I heard the events. Are you all right? How did you hear? Confused, I asked. A pause occurred. She said they posted about it. Where was it posted? Instagram. Jenny claimed that because you were jealous, you had a breakdown and called off your own trip. My blood became cold. What? When the toxic one eventually leaves, she captioned the photo, which showed a boomerang of wine glasses clinking. Prepare for the reunion with the hashtag free of narcissists. I couldn't speak. My family was making fun of me online after they lied about a trip I had paid for and voted me out. I realized then that something much more profound was happening. You know, Maya said, this is nothing new, but I didn't want to say anything. For months, Jenny has been making disparaging remarks about you to everyone, such as, she said that you were having financial difficulties, that you pleaded to be invited to the reunion, and that you threatened to call it off if you weren't given additional credit. Feeling lightheaded, I got up from the couch. I said, she said. What? Maya sounded uncomfortable. She has been spreading it all over the place. She may be attempting to distance herself from you. Without saying goodbye, I hung up. In the same hour, I checked my email. I still had my flight schedule. I reserved it for the entire family. I took it open, hands shaking. Whose seat was given a business class upgrade? My sister's, not my. Go for it. I almost dropped my phone when I opened the reservation. She would return to use my card. While I was arguing with her about stress 2 days ago, a little silent charge of $1.500 appeared. That was the last straw. I gave the airline a call. Hello, I clenched my teeth and said, all 4 of the tickets under my last name should be canceled. The female caller hung up. Each and every one. Each and every one. The one that terminates in seat 3, in particular. I didn't protest when I got to my parents' place that evening. I had to look at their faces. Mom opened the door. Her smile quickly vanished. Oh, it's you! Don't be shocked, I said as I entered. You made enough internet posts to attract attention. She didn't dispute it. I entered the living room right away. As if it were 1985, my father was there reading the paper. Jenny was sitting there looking at Airbnbs on her laptop. I responded, You'll need a new card. She raised her head. What? The travel card was banned. The flights were canceled. Another visitor rebooked the property. It's off in Tuscany. You wouldn't. She spat. Yes, I did. You're ruining the entire journey. I chuckled ominously. Oh, honey. The moment you removed me from it, you ruined it. At last, my dad put down his newspaper son. Don't act hastily. Slowly, I turned to face him. Rash? I was voted off of my own trip by you. Take my money, then let her to tell the whole family falsehoods about me. This isn't hasty. Justice is served here. Fairness? Jenny got to her feet, red-faced. You're amazing. The fact that everyone listens to me has always made you resentful, I remarked funny, taking a folded piece of paper out of my jacket since I had just listened to your financial statement. On the coffee table, I tossed it. Jenny's gaze expanded. Where did you purchase that? I wrote on the card. Finally, I printed the transactions over the previous 90 days. Designer purses, spa treatments, and oh, a non-refundable down payment for a Positano private boat. Did you have a side excursion planned? Mom got to her feet. Now let's all relax. Calm? I let out a bark. I requested receipts. Therefore, you labeled me difficult. In the meantime, she is using my account to book boats as if she were a member of the royal family. Leaping forward, my sister grabbed the statement and attempted to rip it. You've overreached yourself, she remarked. No, I declared myself free. She stopped. What? I reported fraud to the bank over the phone. My card has been being used by you without my consent. An investigation is under progress. You wouldn't risk it. She gave a hiss. I dare say I smiled icily. And you know what? Everything is theirs. IP addresses, delivery addresses, and timestamps. You're losing more than just your trip. Your credit score is going to drop. Leave now. She let out a scream. Face reddened. You are no longer a member of this family. I finally uttered something that we both agreed with. I paused just long enough to say one more thing before turning to face the door. I wish you success in letting the family members know why you won't be in Italy next month and why the police could call. I made noise because they believed they could degrade me in silence. Loud audience. Unforgettable sound. I received a letter a week after canceling their ideal trip to Italy and freezing the travel card. Not a call, not a message, a real letter from an attorney. I initially believed it to be a scam. No, though, it was genuine. A formal legal notice on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Walker and their daughter, Jennifer Walker, that has been carefully printed and signed. My sister and my own parents had filed a lawsuit against me. They were threatening to take legal action because I had interrupted their finances by cutting off support at a crucial moment. Holding the paper, I stood in my kitchen, trembling with a mixture of incredulity and rage. My family members had taken advantage of my money and generosity, and they attempted to sue me for it after I established boundaries. I didn't respond. I did not make a call. I had a plan. 6 p.m. on Saturday. Dinner with the family. The final one I would ever go to. When my dad opened the door and saw me, he became pale. Why are you here? He let out a bark. I grinned. Come on, please. I was invited. Have you not read the letter from your own attorney? He took a step back but remained silent. Everyone was already sitting inside. Jenny, my mother, and her boyfriend. Liam, my brother. Two inquisitive aunts who enjoyed gossip. Excellent. After entering, I placed my tablet on the coffee table and connected it to the HDMI. Jenny gave an eye roll. What is this? A spectacular stunt, maybe? A small slideshow, I see, I said with a smile. Before you hauled me to court, I thought we could all agree. She began, I swear to God. However, I pressed play. The initial slide. A screen grab showing her upgrading to business class on her flight with my card. The following slide. She signed a hotel receipt that was in my name. A luxurious suite costs $800. Next came surveillance footage showed her checking into a hotel in the heart of the city. She and her boyfriend were laughing. I'm tapping my card. The room fell silent. What is this? My mother inquired in a quiet voice. Jenny got up and grabbed the iPad, but I had the files backed up beforehand. She shouted, This is a setup. Everything is being manipulated by him. I give her a direct look. It's funny how everything, including the dinner reservations and spa appointments, precisely matches your spending history. You have no idea how anxious I've been. She lost her temper. You said you would assist us. I took a step forward. I was helpful. I bled. I paid. You took something. My father pounded the table with his hand. That's sufficient. Your actions are ruining this family. I looked over at him. Eyes met. You sought to sue me with the daughter who has been committing credit card theft for months after destroying it. The moment you called a vote to banish me. I am no longer your piggy bank. I am your father. Jenny gritted her teeth and snarled. You are pitiful. Well, I'm only beginning. I took out the last paper, a letter from my bank's fraud department. Official notification that Jennifer Walker's unjustified allegations are the subject of an ongoing inquiry. Dated, signed, sealed. Liam, who had been quiet up until this point, leaned in. Did you actually file that? I looked over at him. Indeed. I also offered her a week to repay it. She didn't. Instead, she shared memes. Really? He muttered. Jenny looked across at him. Are you truly going to support him? I said. Jenny, you didn't respond. You reserved a boat in Positano using my identity. When I was not invited to the reunion, you sent me a laughing emoji. You're sitting here now, pretending that I betrayed you. We are related. My mother let out a cry. No, I said icily. We are both givers and users, and I'm done giving to you. Jenny sprang forward as if she were about to strike me. When your name is brought up in court, you will come to regret this. Then everyone is aware. Discovers what? I yelled that I had paid for your whole lifestyle while you made fun of me in group chats, accused me of fraud, and then blamed my reaction on you. I didn't back down even when my voice cracked. You were like a wallet to me, nor a son, nor a sibling, only a resource. Guess what, though? Source. Weary. Everybody froze. The air was heavy with anger, disbelief, and shame. Then the most startling event took place. Liam got to his feet. I'm done too, he said. I've witnessed everything. The gaslighting, the guilt trips, the falsehoods. I didn't want to upset anyone, so I ignored it. He gave me a glance. But Liam, you made the correct decision. With a trembling voice, my mother said, Don't begin, don't begin. He lost his temper. You folks attempted to take from him and destroy him. Then you pretend that he is the villain. Jenny looked across at Liam, wide-eyed. All you're feeling is jealousy. I've always made you jealous. Perhaps, he responded. I didn't steal a boat, though. That was it. I picked up my coat and turned to face the door. I said, one more thing. I terminated my phone contract, my Netflix subscription, my auto insurance, and everything else. This ATM is closed, so if you want Tuscany, go earn it yourself. After that, I left without turning around this time. They believed I would collapse. Rather, they did. I left the supper the next evening. Are you familiar with that battlefield? Not because I was nervous, but because I didn't sleep. For the first time in my life, I was alive. While everyone else was making excuses, I wasn't the one who was apologizing, squinting, or doubting myself. I got to my feet. I retaliated without flinching. Then the dominoes began to fall. The first day was quiet. I noticed that my phone was oddly silent the next morning. You went too far, no. Communications. Mom isn't guilt-tripping. Dad didn't call in a panic, just tranquility. I brewed coffee. I rolled the windows open. Like someone who had burned the bridge and relished the fire, I put on my favorite playlist and started dancing. However, the quiet was short-lived. 3:42 p.m. It broke. Liam sent a message. They're going crazy. Mom is in tears. Jenny has shut herself in her chamber. According to Dad, you ruined the family. LOL. I grinned. Have you let him know that I have been paying to keep it running for the past 6 years? Liam answered in a single word. Yes. Public fallout on day 2. My inbox blew up the following day, but not for my family. It was extended family, cousins, second cousins, aunts I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone had seen Jenny's now deleted Instagram stories, the lawyer letter, the fraud claims, and they were pissed at her. I'm so sorry. We had no idea what you were dealing with. I always knew something was off with Jenny. However, if you need a place to stay, our guest room is open. You're not alone. One message stood out. It was from Aunt Clara, my mom's older sister, who had once disowned her over an inheritance fight 20 years ago. You did something none of us ever had the fortitude to do. You stood up to her. I'm proud of you. I didn't even know where I was weeping until I saw the tears strike my keyboard. Day 3. Jenny's collapse. I was at the gym mid-rep when Liam phoned. She did it, he said. Did what? She broke down like full-on breakdown, screaming at Mom and Dad, threw a wine glass, screaming. It's all your fault since now the extended family is blacklisting her. I sat down on the bench, breathless. She said what? She stated you humiliated her, wrecked her image, and ruined her prospects with Brian. You remember Brian, the dentist she's been dragging along? Yes, indeed, Mr. Prenup, I said. That's right. The fraud issue was made public. He abruptly interrupted her. He doesn't date criminals, he told her. I laughed so hard I almost choked. Additionally, she yells that you are grandma's favorite. That was Liam's addition. Stop talking. What? Yes. Grandma must have amended her will, departed from your home. I kept quiet. She didn't tell me. I muttered. Last year, she told me. I said, Liam said, claimed that you were the only person to ever inquire about her well-being without requesting money. Stated that if she was going to give anything up, it would be to a person who didn't treat her like a shopping cart. I remained silent and allowed the gravity of the situation to set in, because I was at a loss for words. The knock on day 5. Someone knocked on my door while I was working from home. I almost burst out laughing as I scanned the crowd. Dad? He appeared to have been coerced into standing there. I opened the door without getting out of the way. May I enter? He inquired. No, I said plainly. He winced, then made an effort to smile. All I wanted to do was talk. I pressed myself up against the frame. Do you want to talk now? The back of his neck was rubbed. Look, there's a problem with your mom. Since dinner, she hasn't eaten much. And, Jenny, Dad? Sharply, I replied. Turn back if your purpose is to guilt trip me. I'm done apologizing on behalf of the family. He blinked. It's unfair. No, I lost my temper. The fact that you allowed Jenny to make fun of me is unfair. Take something from me? Tell the whole family a lie. You supported her as if she were a member of the royal family. She's your sister. I was also your son. I let out a bark. Your holidays were paid for by me. I covered bills when you mentioned money's tight. And I never received anything except sadism in return. Quiet. He went silent. He said, I didn't come here to argue. All I wanted to convey was that we were mistaken. Every one of us. I gave him a glance. I was erased by you, I said. And now that the funds have been depleted, Jenny is now exposed. You now recognize me. He didn't respond. But he inquired in a low voice before he departed. Is there any possibility that this may be resolved? No, I didn't hesitate. I then closed the door. 7th day, the change. Sunday of the next week? I opened my laptop, made a pot of strong coffee, and woke up late. Italy was not on my mind. Iceland was on my mind. A journey to me alone. No expectations, no guilt. The quiet, just the sky and myself. I made the reservation. Then I noticed a message that stopped me cold as I checked my messages. Jenny sent it. Nor an insult, nor a tirade. You alone are victorious. I hope you're content. After a long moment of staring, I texted back. Winning wasn't the point. The goal was to end the game at last. I also blocked her, the new standard. It has already been weeks. I relocated to a different apartment. Greater, more intelligent, and above all, mine. I updated my phone number. All shared accounts have been closed. Get a fresh credit card. Establish clear limits with everyone, even Liam, who is still coming to terms with himself. And what do you know? They are not missed. Not the drama, not the guilt, not the never-ending story in which I am the self-centered character. Because they thrived on my quiet while I refused. I am at ease now, true tranquility. And I remind myself, would you burn yourself alive again to keep them warm? Whenever I feel the need to contact, explain, or return. And it's always the same response. No, they intended to shatter me. I broke the cycle instead. I used to believe that saying yes all the time was the way to be the good one in the family. Yes to making the payment. Yes to extending forgiveness. And yes to being silent while everyone else screamed. In actuality, though, they never saw me as the nice guy. It was me who was helpful. And I turned into the adversary when I was no longer helpful. That insight struck me like a ton of bricks. 2 months after the supper, one morning, standing on a cliffside with a view of the ocean, I was hiking by myself. My clothing was whipped by the wind. Below, waves smashed ferociously. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. I have a fresh voicemail from Mom. You are missed. Jenny has been attending counseling. Your father doesn't say much. Can we just return to the previous state of affairs? I burst out laughing. Return. Returning to what? Returning to becoming their lifestyle's silent sponsor. It's back to the jeering, manipulated, deleted. Let's go back to the time when I thought that being exhausted was the same as being loved. No, never again. Jenny wrote me a handwritten note a week later. I don't think you'll pardon me. I just wanted to let you know that everything is gone. Brian, my buddies, my work, you're happier without us, according to Mom. And I believe she's correct. It still aches, though. I have lost any sense of who I am. She enclosed a $7,000 check. I gazed at it. Not because I was in need of the cash, but since it represented something more. I had already rebuilt more than they had ever removed. Responsibility. I didn't cash it. I wrote one line on the envelope and mailed it back. Money cannot purchase serenity. I had to learn the lesson the hard way. However, weeks later, the last piece of closure appeared out of nowhere. I heard a voice behind me while I was leafing through a paperback in a bookshop. Hello, are you Walker? The first pivoted. A woman with a kid in her arms, maybe in her 30s, stood there. I apologize, she responded hastily. I believe you once assisted my sister with her rent a few years back. Your relatives turned against you, she said. I blinked. Yes, indeed. She claimed she told me about you. He demonstrated boundaries for me. The woman grinned. I wanted to express my gratitude, that's all. Then she turned to go. I was frozen there, beating a stranger with my heart. I don't even recall them assisting. Nevertheless, my narrative had spread. My power had reverberated. Not in dramatics or headlines, but in subtle change. Here's the reality, then. I wish I had heard that years ago. You have no acquaintances. Your devastation, not out of loyalty or love, not even for blood. You are not born into a family. When you speak enough, it's who respects you, within me. That's what I said. I meant it. And I didn't turn around. Last sentence. Their ATM is not me. Neither their safety blanket nor their scapegoat. I'm free. Furthermore, I will never again have to pay for my own quiet. Story 3. She simply isn't mine. I never requested to raise a child for someone else. I never really connected with her. My mother's voice was that, calm, far away, as if she were discussing a clothing she had never liked or a neighbor's dog. When I heard her say it, I was 16, sitting by alone in the corridor. As I listened to a discussion that would alter my entire perspective on family, my knees were drawn to my chest. The phone line paused for a long moment, then her voice, light and informal, again. She will mature and go like everyone else. If I avoid being very involved, it will be simpler. I'm Vanessa, and I'm currently 31 years old, but that night was the last time I was someone's daughter. You never forget your 16th birthday, so the saying goes, I'd want to. From the cake I made myself, I can still smell the vanilla icing. I taped the streamers to the ceiling. As if to break the stillness, balloons were hanging to the walls. I kept on waiting. The invites had been sent by me. Just in case, I had even pleaded with my mother to remind others. She murmured and looked at me wearily. Don't have high expectations, all right? She didn't want me to be disappointed, but at the time, I believed she meant good. However, when 7 o'clock rolled around, and I understood that she wasn't attempting to shield me from disappointment since nobody had arrived, not even her. The letdown was her. I pretended that the vacant chairs were occupied as I sat at the table with a paper crown on my head. To make myself feel less alone, I giggled at stories I made up and whispered jokes into the air. And then I heard her say those words. She simply isn't mine. It didn't hurt. I was branded by it. On that night, I didn't weep. I refrained from screaming. I just observed my unfinished cake as the candles melted. I knew something most people never do, even at the age of 16. The person who is meant to love you without conditions doesn't always do so. 15 years have passed since that evening. I established a life away from that house and the lady who occupied it. I went to school, developed a job, and created something from the ashes she left behind. People now describe me as powerful, self-assured, and unflappable. The 16-year-old girl who is still waiting to be seen, however, is not visible to them. Up until this week, I believed I had permanently buried that aspect of myself. I received a text from a relative I hadn't spoken to in years. Have you heard that your mother is hosting a lavish celebration for her 60th birthday? Elegant location. Your sister is assisting with all of the planning. No invitation was sent. Naturally, there wasn't. However, something changed within me. Not sadness, not rage. Only a faint, unyielding glimmer of interest. Proceed. A hushed voice. Not to engage in combat. Not to plead. Not even worthy of pardon. only to observe. Perhaps she changed. Perhaps this was her attempt to make things right, of accepting me back into a narrative that had previously written me out. Or perhaps it was really a new chapter in the same book. I'm not 16 this time, though, and I'm not going in with nothing. The celebration is 3 days away. I was at the base of the stairs that I hadn't ascended in more than 10 years. The home remained the same. The corners of the same light blue paint are peeling. The door's wind chime is the same. When I waited for someone, anybody, to remember that I existed, I used to watch that one swing. I wasn't begging here. I was not here to take anything back. I simply had hope. A little pathetic ember of it. In my palms, though, it still burned. I was holding a box with a plain blue ribbon wound around it and covered in cream paper. I had discovered a brooch at an antique store. Gentle, timeless. It was the same type my mother used to adore in storefronts but never purchase. I wanted to present it to her face to face. Simply wish them a happy birthday and go. Easy, tidy, respected. I went to knock on the porch. Nothing at first. Then she appeared when the door creaked open. My sister. Her face was instantly filled with contempt. It didn't change. Boredom. I was never able to distinguish between her and me. She rested her head on the frame. She had her arms folded, like if she were defending a castle. Well, she began, glancing over me as if I were a piece of sticky welcome mat. This is not what was intended. I refused to fall for the ruse. Simply held the present up a little, gave a little smile. Mom, are you home? She remained still. Why? A recognizable voice drifted in behind her composed voice before I could respond. Chilly. Empty. I am, and then my mom showed there looking flawless, with ivory pearls around her neck. As usual, like glass stretched too thin, her grin was fragile. She gave me the kind of look one might give a funeral attendee who remained too long. She answered, I had no idea you were in town. Not friendly, not even interested. Just the facts. I extended the present. Your birthday was mentioned to me. This is just something I wanted to leave. Best wishes to you. She glanced at the package and then back at me. She tightened her grin. You ought not to have shown up. I blinked. It's only a modest present. I'm not going to remain. She interrupted me. Family is the focus of this weekend. The words hit my gut like ice. I remained still. I did not lower my hand. She inhaled. The following sentence was spoken as if it were a court closing statement. Practiced and finished. You're not welcome. Once, you were a visitor to this residence. That's all. It was there. Like a warning sign, the boundary between them and me was charred into the earth. I turned to face my sister. She didn't recoil. Her mouth really twisted into a grin that bordered on a sneer. Don't make a fool of yourself, she whispered quietly. Simply leave. No shouting, no doors slamming, no big moment. Only rejection. Plated and served calmly, as if they had been waiting for me for years. Maybe to feel something, maybe to give them one more chance to change their mind. I stood there for a little while longer. However, nothing remained to sense. With deliberate slowness, the door closed. The wind increased. I felt the box's ribbon flutter on my wrist, and suddenly I was on my own once more, as if I were celebrating my 16th birthday, standing outside of a life that I was never permitted to participate in. However, I didn't weep this time. I grinned as I glanced around the home and then at the present I was holding. It was because something sharp inside of me finally woke up, not because I was at peace or forgave. They still believed I was that girl, pleading for love. They lost sight of who I had become. I turned and made my final descent of those steps, and I decided right then and there, keep quiet, final and clean. They must celebrate according to my wishes if they didn't want me at the party. I spent a lot of time sitting in my car. The ribbon fluttered as if it were attempting to break the stillness, and the present remained in my lap. I have no idea how much time I spent staring at that door, or how many times I mentally rehearsed her voice. Once, you were a visitor to this residence. Not family, not a daughter. Only a short-term guest. As if I were a stray. Someone neglected to come back. I felt like something inside of me broke, but not in the same way. This time, no tears were shed. Don't ask the universe to give you a reason. Don't fall into heartbreak. Nothing except silence. As if the quiet before a storm didn't simply blow in. It selects its own course. I inhaled deeply. I went to my glove box and unlocked it. My old phone, which I hadn't used in years, was inside. There's a reason I kept it. I seldom ever used my backup email account, but it had access to it. I spotted that as soon as I logged in. The correspondence from the lawyer for my late father. Details of the subject family trust must be signed. I had disregarded it at the time. They had nothing to offer me. Not even cash. I want seclusion and quiet. Now, however, I read it thoroughly now. My dad. Is it biological? I will never know. Had established my mother's retirement trust. An important one. However, there was a requirement. Only with both daughters' consent could it be released. My consent, my name, and my signature. Then all of a sudden, things changed. They could act as though I never existed. They had the power to twist tails, slam doors, and remove pictures. But without me, they couldn't gain that trust. More than their pride, I had something they needed. And they didn't know. A mixture of a warning and a smile formed on my lips. Perhaps it was time to remind them of who they were dealing with if they were going to act as though I didn't belong. I tapped the screen and the party planner's contact information appeared. Nice tone, polite voice, slightly frazzled. I inquired about the progress of the planning. Yes, we had to reduce the scope a little, tighter than anticipated budgets. Your sister brought up lowering the floral budget and eliminating one of the live musicians. I grinned. What if there was no problem with money? A pause occurred. I apologize. I want to support the event as a sponsor. Calmly, anonymously, I said. It seemed as if I could hear the planner's jaw drop. Oh well, that's generous. But may I ask why? I have my reasons, I replied. One condition? I want control over the tribute video. Just that. Another pause then. I don't see an issue with it. Of course she didn't. Because in their universe, I was invisible, powerless. Just a ghost outside the family picture. Now, however, I was the one paying for their fairy tale. And I was going to write the final chapter. I looked down at the present on my lap. It wasn't mine to give anymore. I carefully placed the package on the curb after rolling down the window. The paper was taken by the wind after the ribbon. It destroyed the streetlight, and I saw it happen. Like me, they lack direction and are quickly forgotten. So far, the party night showed up like a well-practiced deception. The location was stunning and far more sophisticated than the invites had suggested. Champagne silk and floor-length draperies glistened beneath golden lights. Each table was adorned with fresh orchids. In the background, a quartet of strings performed. They have a rich, mellow tone. The improvement was not questioned by anyone. They simply thought that my mother had spent every penny possible, that the perfectionist lady had finally treated herself to the party she believed she had always earned. She moved about the room like a queen at court, grinning, giggling, and taking compliments with feigned humility and humble nods. "Did you do all of this?" she was asked. She gave a charming smile. "Well, I think that important occasions call for more work." The unidentified donor was never disclosed by her. The daughter she swore didn't belong was never given credit. Naturally, she didn't. It would be an admission that someone else was working behind the scenes if she acknowledged that she hadn't done it herself. Someone she wanted to forget. From the shadows, I observed. Present, but unseen. I came not to socialize. I wasn't here to cause trouble. I was here to make a point. I watched them all. The neighbors, the visitors, and the distant relatives. They're all dressed to impress, drinking champagne and clinking glasses. None of them realized what was about to happen, even though I paid for it. Verify your source. Before a lightning strike, tension hovered in the air like dampness. Simply put, they were unaware that the storm had already begun. The lights grew dimmer as the night wore on. The audience quieted down as the MC took the stage and began tapping his microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a wonderful treat in store before we start talking about cake and dancing. An homage to our esteemed guest, 60 glorious years of laughter, love, and life. A round of applause filled the ballroom. My mom used a napkin to dab at her eyes, emotional already. The screen sprang into life. A gentle piano tune was performed. My mother's childhood pictures dominated the screen. White and black. Pictures from a simpler era. It was her first birthday, her graduation, the day of her wedding. Visitors drooled. In a proud whisper, my sister spoke to a friend. The pictures of her daughters, or rather, daughters, came next. On her first day at school, my sister. At her piano concert, my sister. My sister is displaying her letter of admittance to college. The shift follows. The music ceased. The screen was filled with a single image, hazy, unaltered. I was sitting by myself at a plastic table at the age of 7. No balloons, no cake. Not a family, me staring directly at the camera, grin with wide eyes. I felt uncertain, as though I was still awaiting someone's arrival. There was silence in the room. One more picture. Me, once again, older this time, standing on the brink of a household, collectively. The picture ended. Hardly ever put my sister in my mother's arm. Every single time, I was 2 inches out of frame. There were more pictures, a pattern of erasure, neglect, and absence. The piano did not return, but the music did. It was cooler this time. Very little, far away. A gentle song that made your throat clench. Then came the ultimate slide. White letters on a black screen. Happy 60th birthday, Mama. From the daughter you thought didn't deserve to be here. And the one who paid for all you're enjoying tonight, gasps a chair scratched on the floor. Someone whispered, Wait, what? Everyone looked at my mom. Her hands gripped her napkin as if it were a barrier as she froze. And I emerged from the darkness. Not to yell, not to confront, only to be observed. On my terms, at last. For this was more than a celebration. It was a reckoning. The room remained silent even after the TV turned blank. It became deeper, as if everyone had lost the ability to breathe. People gazed. A few looked at one another, uncertain whether to offer a heartfelt applause or an apology. At first, my mother remained still. Her lips opened, the mask shattered, and her hands slowly dropped off her face. Do you find this clever? Her voice trembled with anger as she hissed. Do you consider it a win to make fun of me in front of my friends? Her chair screeched across the floor as she quickly stood up. Sharp, enraged eyes are now on me. You've been an issue all along. Need attention at all times. Being second best is too much for you to bear. You acted like a child and threw a fit. She stepped forward. All right, say whatever you want. Don't act like this is about love, though. Isn't it all about the money? That is the reason you came. You're envious. You're resentful. You remain the pitiful outsider that you have always been. Some of the visitors let out a gasp. One man attempted to gently tug her arm back. She pulled away. I didn't recoil. I gave in to her tirade. Allow her to untangle. In front of the people she had worked so hard to impress, thread by thread. And I reached into my clutch and tapped the screen of my phone when she eventually ran out of steam and the room had completely fallen into agony. The speaker made a click. I couldn't get my voice across. Hers was clear but cracked. Timestamp was recorded. The release has not yet been signed by her. The voice of my sister came next. I believe I can bring her back to my mother, but not yet. Cold and low. Release will finally receive the funds if she signs the trust. For one day, just give her a sense of belonging. One day. All I need is that. Then there was quiet. It was audible. The recognition in her eyes at that moment. Words and traps of her own. The audience pivoted. A few retreated. Others merely gazed. The quartet of strings had ceased their performance. A server held a bottle of champagne in midair and froze. Once more, my mother opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Simply panic. I took a small step forward so that my voice could be heard. Just the truth, without rage or yelling. I wasn't invited to this celebration by you. I was used by you. I had something you needed. And you believed that I was still in such need that I would exchange my honor for scraps. I glanced around and looked into everyone's eyes. However, you were mistaken. She extended her hand for an answer. A return. Anything. However, the harm had already been done. All I had done was press play, and she had revealed herself. It was the quietest the room had ever been. No laughter, no music, just the sound of people holding their breath and their reputations falling apart. My mother appeared to still believe she could rewrite the story to her advantage, as she stood motionless, her mouth open and her eyes wide. But everyone knew she was at her wit's end. As if she were the victim, she stepped toward me and whispered, "Now don't do this to me." Similar to all those years of erasure, exclusion, and silence, as though I should forget them, simply because it was she who felt exposed at last. I just studied her for a moment without moving. I then moved forward slowly and set the unopened gift box down at her feet. Still flawless and immaculate, silently I said, "Don't worry, you weren't harmed by me." I surveyed the space. When I arrived, the patron who had cheered her pitied me and murmured, "I made the celebration for you. You desired." I covered the cost of the band, the dress, the meal, and the flowers. You always wanted attention, and I gave it to you. I looked into her eyes once again. All I did was remind everyone who truly paid for it. And with that, I turned. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge. I only wanted the door to open this time. And this time, I was the one going out. The crowd parted like water. No one dared stop me, because for the first time in my life, they finally knew who I was. Story 4. Most people who knew me growing up would probably tell you that I was the lucky one. My name is Jake, and I am currently 27 years old. Straight A student, received full tuition, found a good tech job after graduation, and perhaps most importantly, was the only member of the family who ever appeared to succeed. They don't mention that good fortune had a cost, and that cost was often my quiet. When my sister Carly was bailed out of her third DUI using my emergency money, I said nothing. When my parents borrowed my graduation funds to replace their roof and neglected to repay them, I kept silent. And I particularly kept quiet for years after I was adopted as the family ATM, posing as the mature kid who could take a bit more strain. That was the dynamic. I was the son who would arrive with bags of food without being asked, the fixer, the helper, and the one who would pay someone's medical bill without requesting wire transfers because the car broke down again. And it became guilt each time I questioned it. "Jake, you're simply in a better position. Your sister has had a difficult life, you know. Would you not allow us to suffer?" During Thanksgiving, I always persuaded myself that it was acceptable to act like the nice son and pretend to fly as my mom cried over the dry turkey and smiled. And my dad made the same 5 jokes about when you were going to settle down. I once believed it was worthwhile. I no longer do. I noticed a change as soon as I came in this past Thanksgiving. Jake wasn't there, you're present. Or a hug from mom that is too warm. Only lukewarm. "Hey, hello!" Charlie scolded me and hardly looked up from her phone as she cleaned her hands on a dish towel. I attributed it to stress. When money was tight and I took a bottle into the kitchen, they would always behave strange. It was then that I saw the family album on the coffee table. It had been years since that monster had appeared. It was hidden in a box in the attic, with all those old awkward kid pictures when I last saw it. Carly was missing her 2 front teeth, and I was wearing overalls. At Christmas, our parents appeared 20 years younger. I was shocked to see it again because it used to be a Christmas staple. Perhaps someone was experiencing nostalgia. While everyone was occupied with conversation and switching between football games, I picked it up and began flicking through the pages without any fanfare. The first few were fuzzy vacation photos, birthday photos, and lovely newborn photos. But as I continued, I became aware of something strange. All of the pictures that featured me were ripped. Not only ripped, chopped out, and sloppily, as though someone had looked at me in the photo and decided I didn't belong. I initially believed it may have been an accident. Perhaps some pages were damaged by water damage or were trapped. Carly's face, however, remained unharmed. She appeared in every picture, smiling, laughing, and taking center stage. I turned page after page, and each time my face was included in a photograph, it was torn out. My graduation from high school, just my parents and Carly grinning in front of a flag. Even though I was subsisting on instant noodles, I paid for that Christmas and gave gifts to everyone. I finished my present pile, Carly alone unwrapping gifts. I had a racing heart. I had a burning face. As I sat there, I watched as 27 years of evidence that I belonged to this family were destroyed, and nobody made any comment. I gently closed the album and replaced it in its original location. I said nothing at all. That night's dinner was the typical passive-aggressive marathon. Despite having requested me to bring store-bought rolls, Mom was critical of the ones I brought. Carly implied that her rent had increased while complaining about her work once more. Given that I had paid off his credit card debt last spring, Dad's casual remark about young people nowadays Squandering money on avocado toast was funny. I grinned the entire time. I gave a nod. Their jokes made me chuckle, but something inside of me had broken. After dessert, when Carly was browsing TikTok like a teenager and Mom was fumbling with dishes, something had finally completely shattered. Silently, the first took out the envelope I had packed. It was easy. No label white. It was placed on the dining table by me. What is this? Carly eyed it as if it would blow up and inquired. Calmly, it's not for here. Later, open it. That meant she opened it right away, of course. She took out the letter and began to read it. She seemed confused at first, then angry. Mom read it with shaking hands when she gave it to her, observed as her gaze swept across the page. She opened her mouth slightly. As if she had been winded, she gripped her chest. Then she broke down in tears, not merely sniffling, weeping, the type of tears you shed when you see that something is shattered, not simply broken. My dad froze in the middle of pouring himself a drink. He gently read the letter that my mother had given him. Line by line, his hands began to tremble. He made a tiny, tight line with his lips, but remained silent. Nobody did. I left them there as well. Although the letter was brief and had been penned days earlier, it was packed with years of meaning. I had rewritten, erased, and re-examined it 100 times. Ultimately, however, it expressed precisely what was required. I informed them that I was done playing the role of scapegoat, the safety net, and the one who pretended that this family was based on love rather than deceit. I reminded them of all the times they had robbed me of my money, time, and thoughts, and how they had never returned anything but blame and expectations. I informed them. I had seen the record. It was the final insult I would take after witnessing what they had done. I clarified that I would no longer be paying Carly's rent, helping with Mom's auto maintenance, or paying for Dad's medical expenditures. That someone would have to figure it out without my help the next time they reached their lowest point. Finally, I informed them that I would not be returning. Not for Christmas. Not on birthdays. Not for anything. I picked up my coat, looked at them one final time, and left the room as the quiet grew. However, that isn't even the most absurd aspect, for what followed. They didn't take it well, to put it mildly. The neighborhood was enveloped in a strange grayish dusk as the sun had already set by the time. I arrived at my car. Everything appeared icy. I was unaffected by the false warmth that appeared to permeate even the homes with those cheery early Christmas lights. I briefly sat in the driver's seat with my fingers gripping the steering wheel and the engine off. I could feel the thumping of my heart in my throat. I had no idea what to anticipate. Perhaps yelling and guilt-tripping. The mother is rushing to the driveway. She begged me not to do this to the family instead, mascara running down her cheeks. Nothing. I did not follow out with a single word. Nothing but quiet. It nearly got worse because of that. There wasn't a sense of shock in the silence. It required computation, reprisal. Furthermore, I knew my family well enough to know that they would not tolerate this going unanswered. I returned by car to my Airbnb across town, a small one-bedroom apartment with a heater that hummed like a lawnmower and creaky floors. It was mine, even though it was ugly. After setting my bag aside, I sat on the bed and gazed at my phone. No messages. No calls were missed. An hour passed while I waited. Nothing has changed. It started the following day. It was subtle at first. Carly posted something ambiguous on Facebook when I woke up. When money is on the line, some people truly show their true selves. This was followed by a vague, motivational quote that made her feel like the one who was hurt. Your family should be your haven, not your battleground. Carly, classic, aggressive in a passive manner. Not specific enough to justify conflict, but public enough to elicit sympathy. Mom then joined in. She made a more dramatic post. A picture of her and Carly as babies in black and white, captioned, I will always be proud of my girl, no matter what. Loyalty matters more than money. I didn't answer. I didn't even react. I knew they were hoping I'd take the bait that I jump into, defend myself, or try to explain. But this wasn't a conversation. This was performance art. But what I didn't expect was what came next. The phone calls to my friends. Some background. Back in high school, I had this tight-knit group of 3 friends, Ben, Marcus, and Lila. We'd stayed in touch over the years, met up when I was in town, shared group chats, and the occasional game night over Zoom. They knew my family was complicated, but I never really unloaded on them. I always felt like talking about it too much, made it real in a way I wasn't ready to admit. Apparently, my mom didn't feel the same hesitation. Marcus texted me first. Hey man, weird question. Did something happen with your family? Your mom called me, said she's worried about you. Then Ben, yo, got a voicemail from your mom. Something about you being under stress and needing people around you. She okay? Even Layla, who hadn't talked to my mom in years, messaged me. Your mom found my number through an old directory from college. She said you're pushing everyone away and asked me to reach out. What's going on? It was bizarre. They were trying to conduct an intervention on me after cutting them off. The worst part was that I almost fell for it. A tiny voice in my brain started whispering, maybe you overreacted. Maybe they're simply wounded. Maybe this is all just a misunderstanding. But then I recalled the images, the way they didn't even flinch when I noticed the record, the way my existence had been wiped from family history, like a nuisance. They weren't injured, they were captured. Still, I felt nauseous. Not because I regretted anything, but because it reinforced something I'd been suppressing for a long time. Their son wasn't me, they invested in me, and I was being liquidated now that the returns had stopped coming in. Calmly, I explained the situation to my buddies in a group message. I refrained from venting. I didn't speak poorly of anyone. I just outlined it, point by point. The money, the guilt, the pictures, the letter, the years of manipulation, and how I was ultimately putting peace over duty. They all gave the same answers. Ben, that's dude. I have no words at all. You have my admiration. You're worthy of more than that circus. I'm very sorry you had to go through that, Layla. We appreciate you confiding in us enough to let us know what you need. Marcus, I've got your back. Families should be there to love you, not to take advantage of you. You made the correct decision. Really? It ought to have ended there. However, it wasn't. Because my supervisor called me 2 days later. I now work for a mid-sized firm from home. Even though I've always kept business and family totally apart, my mom managed to get in somehow. She apparently requested to speak with HR over the phone at the front desk of my firm, stated that she was concerned about her son's mental health and believed that they ought to be informed of certain risky conduct. I'll say it again. Since I was no longer able to support her lifestyle, my mother attempted to steal my career. Fortunately, my employer is a sensible man. He discussed the conversation with me in private, saying he thought something strange was happening and that I might want to deal with it directly. He even suggested that I take some paid time off if I wanted to decompress. I said no. I required the order, the routine, something to cling to while my whole family fell apart like a cheap card table. Even though we hadn't gotten in touch since I left, I blocked my mom's number and Carly's, and even my dad's that evening. I figured that could be the end of it unless you count like Carly's petty Facebook post. I was mistaken because a few days later, instead of an email or text, I received a letter in the mail. A real letter, written by hand. No address for return. There was only one page of paper inside. No sign-off, no hello, just 4 words, all capitalized. We are owed everything by you. Suddenly, the game was different. I held the letter like it may catch fire in my hands as I sat at my small Airbnb kitchen table. The paper shook slightly, not because of a strong wind or anything, but more because my fingers were trembling. Fear wasn't the reason, not quite. Something more surgical, something colder, similar to the sensation you get just before applying pressure to a wound that needs sutures. For a long time, I gazed at those 4 words. We are owed everything by you. Everything. I don't appreciate all that you've done. Now, please, let's have a conversation. Not even. How did you know? As if I were property? As if they were pursuing a debt. I knew then that I was no longer striving for respect. I was only attempting to get out of a contract that I never signed. I let the envelope fall to the table and leaned back. I experienced an odd sense of tranquility, the type that comes just after you give up on the idea that things will return to their previous state. At last, that small part of me, the child who still thought his parents loved him, without conditions let go of the ghost. And when it happened, my perspective changed. Sharper. Similar to an engineer disassembling a malfunctioning circuit. What had I done incorrectly? The system was where? Broken. I took out my laptop that evening and began gathering all of the information. Not yet, not for retaliation. Just some clarification. I reviewed the last 6 years' worth of bank statements. Callie receives every wire transfer, utility bills, and every payment I make to my folks. All the loans that were never paid back. My stomach twisted at the total. It was a lot, I knew, but this. Nearly 6 figures were involved. Pay the rent, bailouts from credit cards, down payments, auto repairs, Carly's child's tuition at a private school, even food, and there was never a thank you for any of it. Only in anticipation, I included text screenshots. Things like, "You wouldn't leave us struggling, would you?" were spoken by my mother. Alternatively, "You do not want Carly to be evicted." The ones to which I replied, yes, even when I was barely making ends meet on ramen. Then I discovered something I had completely forgotten. A recording was made. Only the audio from 3 months prior, when I had unintentionally hit the record button while visiting for my dad's birthday, was automatically saved to my phone. I left for a minute, and it captured their chat. Although I had attributed the uncomfortable visit to overall dysfunction, I did recall it. It was something different from what I heard on the recording. I was supposed to be outdoors when my mother began speaking to Carly in the kitchen. "We must keep him with us, will we? Avoid upsetting him. Not until the mortgage is paid off. He is free to do as he pleases when the refinancing is approved. Carly, he's retreating already." He requested the automobile things receipts. "Mom, fix him then. Are you able to accomplish that?" "He's too busy giggling to check on Dad. He refuses to leave. He's overly lenient. It has always been." Listening to strangers was like that, similar to a family. I had only dreamed of it. They didn't sound in the least bit conflicted. They were planning something. Making plans? As if I were a commercial transaction or an armed checkbook. I hit the stop button. The last nail in the coffin was that. The calls, the letter, and the quiet. The melodramatic Facebook. They were signs. This recording. The illness was this. I didn't act, though. Not quite yet. I wanted to be believed. I wanted to congratulate them and send them a copy with all my might. In a huge typeface, "You portrayed yourselves." However, this would not be another emotional breakdown. They would anticipate that. No. Really put an end to this if I was going to. I needed to be as strategic and patient as they had been. So I waited. I never answered the letter. I didn't make any posts. I didn't even discuss it with my buddies. Things are still strange when they go beyond the simple. I wanted them to believe that I was offended, and perhaps even regret it. When individuals like my family believe you're vulnerable once more, that's when they become brave. And I was correct. My mother sent me an email 3 days later. No topic line, only one phrase. "If you don't become too emotional, you can still remedy this." A scanned copy of the letter was included. It came from an attorney. Hers? It seems that they were looking at their legal possibilities in relation to unmet family duties. And they would have to think about the repercussions if I didn't stand behind Carly throughout her custody battle. I gazed at it, numb. For failing to defend my adult sister in court, they threatened to sue me. I had no idea what to do with that at all. For what reason were they intending to sue me? Not covering her attorney's fees. Not providing her with emotional support throughout her custody dispute with a man she had dated for 3 weeks. I nearly laughed at first. The ridiculousness was too much. However, it began to burn more the longer I sat with it. Because they were attempting to penalize me for stepping back to teach me a lesson, even if it was unfounded and never made it to a trial. I knew then that I had been thinking too narrowly. A lesson was what they want. All right, I would offer them a memorable one. I became silent on the outside for the following 2 weeks. I kept my cool. No irate emails, no hurried replies, no dramatic postings, nothing but quiet. On the inside, though, I was getting ready. I first got a lawyer, not because I believed their case to be legitimate. I wanted to be protected, so they didn't. I discovered a modest but astute lawyer who focused on harassment and family law disputes. He smirked and remarked, "This won't hold water, but let's hit back harder." After one meeting and a glance at the fictitious legal threat, I then collected all of the receipts. The emails, messages, wire transfers, and even the recording. Family exploitation evidence is the name of the tidy digital file I created out of them. It had more than 80 pages. I handed it to my attorney, who assisted me in writing a letter of stop and desist that mentioned financial exploitation, emotional pain, and harassment. We didn't merely tell them to stop. We made it plain, informally, that any more attempts to get in touch with me, put financial pressure on me, or publicly disparage me would be met with a civil lawsuit. We had even estimated the total amount they had stolen throughout the years. The amount was 6 digits. I mailed the letter after that. They each demanded a certified return receipt. Mom? Dad? Carly? I didn't stop there, though. Do you recall how my mother had gotten in touch with my employer? A big line had been crossed by that call. I thus had my lawyer file a formal complaint with her employer's Human Resources Department. She had a part-time job at a nearby clinic. It wasn't malevolent. It was true. I described the circumstances, provided proof to support it, and explained how her unfounded statements to my employer had resulted in needless stress at work. I didn't request that she be fired. All I wanted was for them to know about her actions. However, I was familiar with little towns. Word would get out. The last step followed. I approached my extended family members, whom I had always kept at a distance since I didn't want to share personal details, one by one. The sister of my mother, a cousin of my dad, even the closest friend of my late grandma, who had always written me a handwritten letter. I didn't send them a dramatic tell-all or a manifesto, just a straightforward statement. Just so you know, Mom and Carly's side has been really dramatic. For the sake of my mental health, I'm separating from the family. Feel free to contact me personally if you hear something crazy. While some answered, others ignored me, and they were astounded when I revealed a little more. That explains why your mom has been making up this whole story about you being ungrateful. One person even stated. It sounded precisely right to me. It was a gradual but delicious fallout. Carly posted additional cryptic phrases and passive-aggressive jabs in an attempt to elicit compassion online. However, her custody battle began to unravel without me paying her rent or legal fees. Her former partner successfully sued for full custody. Although I felt bad about it, especially for her child, I also didn't feel bad about it. She had taken advantage of me despite my years of trying to assist. My father didn't get in touch, not once. Perhaps he felt embarrassed. Perhaps he didn't give a damn. Silence was great with me, however. In contrast, my mother did not give up lightly. She stopped talking for a few days after receiving the cease and desist. She then addressed a handwritten note to my previous address, which was fortunate enough to be forwarded. It was 5 pages lengthy, defensive, rambling, and chock full of the typical guilt tricks. We're the only family you had. Everything was misinterpreted by you. We always have your best interests in mind. I've read it once. I fed it into the shredder after that. Since then, I have not spoken to them. It has now been around 6 months. I relocated to a different apartment. My own space. There are no family pictures on the wall, just tranquility. After years of putting off a trip, I finally made the reservation. Greece. In Santorini, I was standing on a cliff with a view of the ocean. Considering how much of my life I had been burdened by other people, and I felt light for the first time, not because I avenged myself. I stopped allowing those who didn't love me to conditionally define what I owed them, not because I won. I had lost a lot to them: time, cash, recollections. However, I was the one item I wouldn't let them retain, and I believe that was the true triumph. Story 5. At the reunion, my family made fun of me for being a hungry artist. Cartoons are still being drawn. My sister went out. They had no idea that I was the CEO of the animation studio that had recently acquired their business. I purposefully picked the most basic item from my closet and straightened my basic black dress in the penthouse apartment mirror. On my desk was the standard issue MacBook that I had purchased especially for family trips. A few simple digital artworks are shown on the screen. Nothing very noteworthy. Not a trace of the empire I had established. The gold embossing on the Morrison family reunion invitation caught the early sun as it sat on my kitchen counter. As usual, it was held at my sister Diana's Hamptons estate. Come celebrate family accomplishment with us. I pondered whether they would ever celebrate any of mine as the card declared. My CFO sent me a message on our most recent purchase, and my phone buzzed. Contracts are prepared. The sale was just authorized by the tax board and Maya Morris. They don't know. The purchaser is Dreamscape Animation Studios. Tucking the phone inside my handbag, I grinned. My accomplishment, which I had carefully concealed for 10 years, was going to pay off in the most fulfilling way imaginable. I had time to think about how I got here throughout the trip to the Hamptons. It meant one thing to grow up in the Morrison household. It was all business. James Morrison, my father, started Morrison Tech from the bottom up and made it a reputable brand in the corporate software industry. Diana, my sister, had risen through the ranks of the corporation and earned her MBA from Harvard. Exactly like him. Then there was me, the letdown. The daughter who chose to scribble in notebooks rather than research business tactics. Maya, art is not a career, as my dad used to say, he said in a disapproving tone. At best, it's a pastime. At worst, it's a diversion. I still recall the day I informed Dad that, rather than taking my spot at Wharton, I would be majoring in animation at art school. There was an overwhelming hush in our dining room. You're squandering your life. Diana had stated so while our mother used a tissue to gently wipe her eyes, as though I had suddenly revealed a fatal condition. What? Did they not know? What? I also had been attending night classes in business administration, but I never mentioned this to them. They believed that I was squandering my time in art school. In reality, I was laying the groundwork for something greater than they could have ever imagined. I won a student competition with my first animated short film. It was not much of a reward. It was sufficient to get started, although it only came with $5,000 and some industry exposure. Using the funds, I hired 2 more artists to produce content for small businesses out of my modest flat. At that point, I made an intriguing discovery. Good animated training movies, marketing collateral, and product demos were in high demand in the business sector. The demand for top-notch digital material was enormous, but there weren't many studios capable of producing it. My little team grew to 15 members in just 2 years. On all the documentation, I used my middle name, Phoenix, and we incorporated as Dreamscape Animation Studios. What would become one of the nation's most inventive animation firms was founded by Maya Phoenix, not Maya Morrison. The family was unaware. Naturally, to them, I was still simply Maya, the struggling artist who occasionally performed freelance work for nearby companies or sold a digital piece online. I only provided enough details to keep the illusion going each time they inquired about my professional background. Then Johanna's mansion appeared. What you would anticipate from someone who judged success in square footage are its immaculate landscaping and well-kept lawns. My very understated Honda Civic looked even more out of place as premium brand cards lined the circular driveway. I paused to look at my mirror one more before parking at the far end of the drive. I had worn very little makeup, kept my hair basic, and left my expensive clothing at home. I had meticulously planned every aspect of my look to preserve the perception my family held of me. The family, the striving artist, disappointment, Maya. As I got closer to the home, I heard my mother's voice over the driveway. We were beginning to question if you would attend. I gave her another air kiss, seeing as her eyes darted over my ensemble, likely figuring out how much it cost and judging it to be suitably unimpressive. Traffic. I followed her inside and explained that I needed to do a commission. Oh, your drawings were really purchased by someone? There was a brief but purposeful wait before the drawings. If only she were aware that I had just approved a $50 million deal with a big tech company for a number of animated training courses yesterday. Rather, I gave a sheepish smile. Only a website for a small business. Nothing noteworthy. The mansion was just as I had remembered it from past parties, ostentatiously furnished and intended to highlight the Morrisons' achievements. The walls were covered with pictures. Diana during her graduation from Harvard. Diana with the tech board from Morrison. Diana on Business Weekly's cover. I was in the one high school picture. Prior to my decision to choose art before profit, I let everyone down. When we walked in, the great room was already packed with family. The air was filled with discussions about market trends, mergers, and stocks. James, my cousin, was presiding over the fireplace, discussing his most recent hedge fund acquisition. Patricia was displaying pictures of her son's recently launched business, and they're there in the middle of everything. Did Diana look flawless in what I identified as an Oscar de la Renta? A gown that cost $12,000? Maya? Her voice had that usual ring of contempt as she yelled out. I'm very happy you could join us despite your artistic endeavors. She gave me a quick hug. She was cautious not to rumple her gown. You look? She hesitated, trying to find a tactful phrase. Feeling cozy? Regards. Playing the part she expected of me? I murmured, tugging at my target dress. You look stunning in your clothing. She smoothed the cloth and established that it was Oscar de la Renta, a small party to close our most recent purchase. Our largest rival in the corporate software market was recently acquired by Morrison Tech. I suppressed a smile. If only she realized that Morrison Tech itself would be a part of my tiny art studio in less than 24 hours. That's fantastic, I responded. It must be going nicely. Better than before, she smiled. Actually, I was just outlining our next major relocation to everyone. We are expanding into the production of digital material. Animations for marketing, corporate training, and other purposes, you know. A beat skipped in my chest. I had pushed to buy Morrison Tech for just this reason. They intended to go into my region and may end up being a serious rival. On the contrary, they were going to join my empire. Diana was unaware of that at the time. Animation? I asked naively. That sounds difficult. Diana chuckled. The room echoed with the sound. Maya, oh, all of it is business strategy. Only technical effort is involved in the actual drawing process. For that, we'll employ individuals. People enjoy it. She gave me an ambiguous gesture. Well, you know, Diana's laugh has attracted other family members. Cartoons are still being drawn. Maya? James, my cousin, inquired with a sneer on his face. You know, if you want a real work, my fond is constantly searching for administrative help. Thank you, I muttered. However, I'm doing okay with my artwork. Diana's eyebrow went up. Is it the reason you continue to drive that outdated Honda? Are you still residing in that little apartment? They didn't know I owned the whole building in which my small flat was situated, or that part of it was part of my collection of cars. A pair of Teslas. The Honda was only used for visits with relatives. I manage. I gave a shrug. A mansion is not necessary for everyone. Succeeding is not the same as getting by. From behind me heard my father's voice. He was watching me with the same disappointed expression as I turned to see him. Diana's most recent transaction is worth more than you will likely earn in your lifetime. Sketching images. Anger shot through me, but I forced it down. Less than a day. All of them will discover how mistaken they were. The press statement was produced and the contracts were signed. Maya Phoenix would be unveiled as the new owner of Mawson Tech and the CEO of Dreamscape Animation Studios by this time tomorrow. I simply grinned and excused myself to fetch a drink for the time being, though. Allow them to enjoy their moment of dominance. Allow them to hold on to their long-held beliefs about me. Retaliation is, after all, an art form for certain people. The family get-together continued into the night. My family members have a fresh chance to remind me of my alleged shortcomings every hour. I continued to check my phone, seeing messages from my executive team confirming that everything was ready for the launch tomorrow. The legal New York Times has authorized the press release. Transition papers are guarded exclusively, all set to sign. I was watching the sun set over Diana's immaculately kept garden from the floor to ceiling windows. My dad came over with a drink of his favorite scotch, the same brand I kept in my office in a case. However, he was unaware of that. His voice had that constant ring of sadness as he continued, Maya. And I've been chatting to your mom. I prepared myself. These discussions seldom ended nicely. He said that artists will be needed by Diana's new digital content business. Basic level information. It would be solid employment, but nothing really inventive. Advantages. And actual pay. He made a point. Real, as though my work wasn't actually work. Despite your lack of business expertise, she is open to giving you a chance. To cover my smile, I took a sip of my champagne. If only he were aware that the yearly income of my business was over 3 times that of Morris and Tech's digital services. Thank you. I'm okay with my freelancing work, Dad. He let out a deep sigh. You're 32, Maya. Don't you think it's time to get out of the drawing game and go out into the real world? Take a look at your sister. Through the windows, she has achieved success, introspection. I could envision Diana presiding over our family members, most likely regaling them with yet another tale of her commercial achievements. She had always been adept at ensuring that everyone was aware of her level of success. I am aware that you believe art is merely teasing you. There's more to it than you think, but I said it carefully. Is there? He pointed to my modest appearance and my basic dress. Because all I see when I look at it is potential wasted. You had the opportunity to attend Wharton and contribute to the history of Morris and Tech. You decided to discard everything instead. For what purpose? Digital drawings. Even after all these years, knowing what I knew, the words still hurt. In fact, I was about to tell him everything when my phone buzzed once more. Morris and the members of the tech board confirmed their attendance at tomorrow's 9:00 meeting. According to a message from my CEO, they don't know what's going on. I swallowed what I had admitted. Not 12 hours, that's how long I could wait. In fact, my father's prompting, nothing, I said. You're correct. I made my decisions. I watched as the last of the sun's rays vanished behind the trees on the other side of the room after he shook his head and left. Diana's laugh rang out once more. Maya's always been different. She was saying to our and Patricia, some people just aren't cut out for real success. At least she's finally accepting the hand up we're offering. I checked my watch. 7:30 p.m. In less than 14 hours, everything would change. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of subtle jabs and condescending offers of help. Cousin James offered to teach me basic business accounting. Aunt Patricia suggested her daughter could help me build a proper website for my little art business. Even my mother got in on it quietly, showing me job listings for graphic design positions at local marketing firms. Through it all, I maintained my facade of quiet resignation, playing the role of the struggling artist. They all expected me to be. But inside, I was counting down the hours. Finally, as the party wound down, Diana cornered me by the coat check. I hope you'll seriously consider Dad's offer, she said, her voice dripping with folks' concern. The position wouldn't be anything too challenging, just basic artwork for corporate presentations, employee handbooks, that sort of thing. We'd start you at an entry-level salary, of course, but it's better than whatever you're making now. I thought about my penthouse office overlooking Central Park, about the team of over 200 artists and animators who worked for me about the groundbreaking projects we were developing that would revolutionize digital animation. I'll think about it, I said. Don't think too long, she advised. Once we announce our expansion into digital content next week, we'll have plenty of qualified applicants. I'm only offering because you're family. I nodded, accepting my cup from the attendant. Speaking of announcements, will you be at the office tomorrow? Of course, she said proudly. 9:00 a.m. sharp. We have a major meeting with our mystery buyers. Some big animation studio is interested in partnering with us, she smirked. See what happens when you think bigger than just drawing pictures. Good luck with the meeting, I said, turning to leave. Maya, she called after me, that outfit you're wearing. If you do decide to take the job, you'll need to dress more professionally. Appearance matters in the corporate world. I looked down at my intentionally modest dress, thinking of the closet full of designer clothes, waiting at home. I'll keep that in mind, driving home. I finally let myself feel the full weight of what was about to happen. 10 years of hiding my success, of letting them believe I was a failure, all leading to this moment back in my penthouse. I hung up my struggling artist costume and changed into silk pajamas that cost more than Diana's precious Oscar de la Renta dress. My real laptop, not the prop I took to family functions, was open on my desk, displaying the final acquisition documents for Morris and Tech. A message popped up from my assistant. Everything's set for tomorrow. Car will pick you up at 8:30 a.m. The Morris and Tech board doesn't know you're attending the meeting. I poured myself a glass of scotch, the same brand my father had been drinking, and walked out onto my terrace. The city lights sparkled below a canvas of electric stars. Somewhere out there, Diana was probably still basking in her imagined triumph, telling her husband about her plans to give her struggling artist sister a chance at a real career. My phone rang. The private line only my executive team had access to. It was Marcus, my colleague Maya, he said when I answered. Just wanted to confirm, you're ready for tomorrow. Once we make the announcement, everything changes. Your family. They'll finally see the truth. I finished all of it. Are you sure you want to do it this way? We could send someone else to the meeting. Keep your identity private a little longer. I thought about my father's disappointment, Diana's condescension. All the years of being treated as less than because I chose art over their version of success. No, I said firmly. I want to be there. I want to see their faces when they realize who they're really dealing with. After hanging up, I stayed on the terrace for a long time, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. Every dismissive comment, every patronizing offer of help, every family gathering where I'd had to bite my tongue. It had all led to this moment. Tomorrow they would realize that the girl they discarded as a failure had built something larger than they could dream tomorrow. They would recognize that success doesn't always look the way they believe it should. Tomorrow, Maya, the struggling artist, would be exposed as Maya Phoenix, CEO of Dreamscape Animation Studios and the new owner of Morrison Tech. I grinned, raising my glass to the city lights. The art of deceit was about to become a masterpiece of disclosure. The Morrison Tech boardroom appeared precisely as I remembered it from childhood trips, all mahogany and leather. Old money and elder pride. I stood in the private elevator, wearing a custom-tailored suit that cost more than 6 months at the entry-level pay. Diana had condescendingly offered me. "Ready, Miss Phoenix?" Marcus asked alongside me. We'd worked together since the beginning, when Dreamscape was only 3 individuals in my flat. I studied my reflection and the elevator's mirrored walls. Gone was the carefully constructed image of the suffering artist. Today, I looked every inch the CEO. I actually was ready. I verified right before the executive floor elevator doors opened. Diana had already entered the boardroom and was chatting animatedly with the other members of the board. In his tailored suit, my father looked imperious as he sat at the head of the table. At first, neither of them saw me, too preoccupied talking about their future goals. They had no idea how drastically their future would alter. The person from Dreamscape ought to arrive at any moment, Diana said. Tech and Maurice will rule the digital content market once this collaboration is complete. In fact, I stated as I entered the room. Plans have been somewhat altered. There was silence in the room. Diana's professional poise broke as her mouth fell wide. I remembered Maya for the first time. My dad got up. His expression was one of confusion. "Why are you here?" "This board meeting is private." I put my briefcase on the table and grinned. "I am fully aware of the purpose of this meeting." I really gave it a call. "This is absurd." Diana regained her voice and snapped. "There will be no need for security," Marcus said as he moved forward fluidly. "Miss Phoenix is quite entitled to be present." Phoenix. Diana squinted her eyes. "Morrison is her name." "Actually," I answered, pulling out my bag and starting to hand out papers. "My professional name is Maya Phoenix. The name I came up with when I started Dreamscape Animation Studios from scratch. The name that everyone in this room is going to know very well." My father glanced down at the papers. I put in front of him, and the blood drained from his cheeks. Acquisition documents. Final contracts for sales.news releases. All set to go. This isn't feasible, he muttered. "Is it?" I sat down at the other end of the table. "Let me tell you about a girl who spotted a need for high-quality corporate animation and developed a firm that today generates over $100 million a year. She liked art and business equally and attended night classes in business administration while she was in art school." Diana was looking through the papers hurriedly. Her hands trembled. You are Dreamscape's CEO, Maya Phoenix. Likewise. I verified the business you have been attempting to collaborate with. I own it. It's been 10 years since I started it, approximately when you all determined that I was wasting my life. However, you're only an artist, though, Diana stumbled. Your flat is small. Do you have a Honda? I couldn't contain my laughter. That little flat is in a building that I own. All I drive to is the Honda. Family activities. Do you think I should have arrived in my Porsche? I'm giving you more reason to believe that I couldn't afford it. My dad was still looking at the papers, especially the Dreamscapes page. Current market value. He whispered all this time. I had agreed all along. Every family get-together when you made fun of my choice of profession, every patronizing offer of assistance, and every analogy to Diana's actual achievements. I was creating something greater than Tech and Morris could ever imagine. Why? Diana insisted. Why keep it hidden? Why? Let's reflect, as you would never have agreed to it. I interrupted her. You would have attempted to seize power and integrate it into the tech empire. You would have made my idea into simply one more business unit. I had to construct something according to my own specifications. I straightened my expensive suit and got to my feet. Furthermore, as of 9 a.m., Morris and Tech are proudly owned by Dreamscape Animation Studios this morning. We will be reorganizing the business with an emphasis on innovation instead of custom. Diana, you are welcome to interview for a position in our creative department, but your role as CEO will be eliminated. Until you retire next month, Father, you will now serve in an advising capacity. The room was completely silent. The other board members sat in startled silence, even though they generally defer to my father in everything. This is not possible. At last, Diana muttered. I can, in fact, and I have. Last week, the board approved the sale, but they were unaware that I was the buyer. The press release is sent out after the contracts are signed. I look at my watch every 10 minutes or so. Just like clockwork, my phone buzzed. The exclusive from the New York Times was live. Technology meets art. Morrison Tech is acquired by Dreamscape Animation Studios, and CEO Maya Phoenix makes a surprise announcement about her plans for digital innovation. I flipped my mind and showed them the headline. About the entry-level job you offered me yesterday, Diana, by the way, I will have to say no. Regretfully, I am overqualified. A haze of legal formalities dominated the following hour. My father sat in stunned silence at the head of the table, which was no longer under his authority, while board members signed transition documents. When the board members dispersed, leaving only my family, Diana at last regained her voice. All these years, she said in a hollow voice, you give us the impression that you're having trouble. We feel sorry for you. No, I corrected her. You decided to be pitying me. You decided to see what you anticipated. The family disappointment, the unsuccessful artist. You didn't even think I may be able to do more. My father, who appeared older than I had ever seen him, reluctantly got to his feet. I said, not rudely, I save it, Maya. This was not an act of retaliation. It was the appropriate business move, so I took it. Morrison Tech needs our innovation to stay afloat in the current market, and Dreamscape needs additional Syntex infrastructure to grow. I packed up my belongings and got ready to go. Tonight, the merger will be formally announced over a family dinner at Le Bernardine. I hope both of you will be present. They gave a silent nod. Excellent! Diana too, of course. I stopped at the entrance. To wear business attire. After all, in the business world, appearance counts. It was a calm journey back to my workplace. Marcus knew me well enough to let me think things out quietly. He didn't say anything till we arrived at my rooftop office with a view of the city. Feeling good, I gazed at the metropolis outside, reflecting on the journey that brought me to this point. It feels natural, like completing a painting that I've been working on for a decade. Messages were piling up on my phone. Family members who had just learned that the failing artist they had fired was really one of the most prosperous CEOs in the digital media industry after they had unexpectedly seen the news. After offering to teach me the fundamentals of accounting, my cousin James had already messaged me 3 times to ask if we could talk about possible collaborations with his hedge fund. Patricia, who had recommended that her daughter assist me in creating a website, kept phoning. My mom had texted too. How come you didn't inform us? I didn't respond to any of them. During supper tonight, they had the opportunity to converse. Rather, the first opened my laptop and started preparing the speech I would deliver to the staff of Tex and Maurice tomorrow. They needed to understand that, despite the fact that leadership was evolving, their positions were safe as long as they were prepared to embrace creativity and innovation. There was one last message from Diana. I must comprehend. Can we have a conversation before supper, please? I gave it a lot of thinking before responding. Stop by my office, the authentic one. 5th Avenue, top level of the Phoenix building. You will be greeted at the security desk. Diana was noticeably uneasy as she stood in my office 1 hour later. She glanced about the room, admiring the original artwork hanging on the walls. She had never previously seen the panorama of Central Park, the obvious signs of achievement. Why? She asked plainly. Why? What? Why did I keep my achievement a secret? What made me purchase Morrison Tech? I let you all think I was a failure, but why? Everything. You and Dad would never have agreed to my achievement on my terms, so I motioned for her to sit. You would have attempted to modify it to meet your standards for success. Quarterly reports, board meetings, and a conventional company structure. However, Dreamscape's success might be attributed to its unconventional approach. We are innovators. We produce. We operate in a distinct way. We are family, though, she objected. We may have been of assistance. As you did yesterday. I arched an eyebrow, pitying me by offering me an entry-level job. Diana, that isn't helpful. Control is that. She was graceful enough to appear ashamed. I had no idea, not even suspected. Since you didn't look, not one of you did. You saw what you anticipated. The creative sibling who failed in the real world. You never thought that commerce and art may not be incompatible. Diana was silent for a while as she gazed out at the cityscape. Now what? Right now? We now proceed. Dreamscape incorporates Morrison Tech, and together, we create something new. There could be a spot here for you if you're prepared to learn how to adjust. Not as CEO, though. No more. Slowly, with comprehension emerging in her eyes, she nodded. You are no longer my little sister, are you? I was never merely your little sister, I corrected her. You just didn't see my true self. As I stood there speaking to our extended family at Les Bernardins that night, I noticed something in their eyes that I had never seen before. Show respect. Nor sympathy, nor condescension, but sincere admiration for fresh starts. I lifted my glass and toasted to the art of achievement. Later that night, back in my penthouse, I opened my old sketchbook, the one I carried through art school, filled with the early concepts that would become dreamscapes. The last page features the first projects. I had composed a quotation that had served as my compass over the years. Hiding your skill until the ideal time to reveal it is the finest art. I closed the book with a smile. At last,